chilera. Undi gala mande hindora. Tyoine tinandi ore. Sanini any other shamba kartewataya.
So if there are any questions, we'll make some time for questions. But if there are no questions, maybe I thought it would be good at this point to address some of the expectations that you have shared at the start of the course. So any kind of questions does not necessarily have to be related with the text itself.
Everything is a reflection of the mind. So that means that object and subject are similar. How does one comprehend this or understand that?
Tini kogi chiwa di dilayit, manzuki sheba gi rangshin ji yura, sheba lana da manzuki sem layda, sem di seshi rigba yi nasra, tini yu tamji ni sem tigi yura, nongwa tsam yinba, ra, ni nongwa tsam yi nasra, yu da yu jen laya jura, yu da yu jen laya di nija ni tade su mejo ra, tade du mejo. Yuda yujen nija da chiba do chagi das tela de zamba. Ni ting anzo gi koa khande sogore bes.
Yuda yujen da ta chiba yimba. Tade yimba khande sola.
Marama yuda kisi thangmasra lo ino zam inasra.
Alelang.
Ani yuda yujen la na yawa mejo do chagi das.
Senza che tende sengdani, chetanji sengdani de tula shi lewara. Anzo chungda chigi kelen de yer. Ra. Tende jirim sidang anzo yuda yujen tadewa yunye penanzo de do de nei di yurima to yujemara. Yujemna na lola la ora. Ra. Yulla di gala chidangi phagela anzo gi lo di toja chibishin. Ine ya yujen to ya yura. Ra lo to wa ina yujen do to da. Ine ya tudu gasu kasne yuji do topa bo de yujen da yuji di yu chagora. Ra. Yuda yujen. Ine ya 다 간다 이 유이나 인지미지 로임이 잡아야 말. 라. 그 파길라 유라방한테 본바 가와라 소바 시시 뭐보 시바만이 오버든 유라. 또 참 유차와라. 이내 다다가서 센잠바로 이제 추타지 가리는 생게 다니잖아 두 번. 근데 이렇게 열라. 지당이 가서 유도 이제 같이 두다.
So now, when we say that everything is but a reflection of the mind, then more particularly within this tradition of the Prasangika Madhyamika school, we wouldn't really use the term reflection of the mind, but we would use appearances in and of the mind. All phenomena exist merely as appearances in and of the mind. Now, when you begin to say that everything is merely a reflection of the self, then of the mind, then that is not really the assertion of the Prasangika Madhyamika school. That's the assertion of the mind-only school, the Chittamatra school, wherein they say that everything is established only in the entity of the mind. And as such, that's more close to the assertion of the Chittamatra school, the mind-only school. Now, when we try to think carefully about what exactly is a subject and what exactly is an object, then we maybe, as a general rule, begin to think of the subject as the subjective consciousness and the object as something separate from the subjective consciousness. But that's not necessarily the case, because the subjective consciousness itself can become an object in meditation. So as such, it's not really the case that we begin to say that both object and subject are the same and one thing. That's not the case at all. Yes.
Tishulu chi nganzogi zuda tiro reshat zula tene nganzo washi ngati chesa yuro di shulu zuda tiro reshatira tigi tambe ani pa yeshila ba datini do shida pena nganzogi mi zu chi thongina nganzo mi shiri karo jela nana ani dindo lo kupai mi kupai gi sama thongdi ni mi kupa do jela ko thongde go love to go mi shiri zai ra yeshidi karna tanda wanshidi nganzogi kupa do lame hinchara yeshidi loana khora ran chugi zugdu pakatu tonto mare kogi mi sheparage ngoda thoni shini yeshila patanggoda tende inzati gala ani yegi shepade namdi khanejisana ani loa ani mi chen kasa ta kanda loana shi jelo ra ine pa shemeshi.
So now, if we are to make sense of this, first we need to look at the different types of consciousness. When we talk about consciousness, we kind of categorize them into the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness. Now, when we look at the relation between the two, then the relation between subject and object becomes a little bit more clear. So we use this example. We say that the sense consciousness are sort of a dumb person who sees everything but is not able to make sense of it. Because it's not the function of sense consciousness to discern each characteristic of the object. Its only function is to perceive it, see it. So for example, see, hear, smell, and so forth. But now, as opposed to that, the mental consciousness is like a blind person. Even though a blind person has all the discerning faculties, but they are not able to see anything. So without the sense consciousness, the mental consciousness is like a blind person, even with the discerning qualities. When objects does not appear to the mental consciousness through the medium of the sense consciousness, then there is no way in which it can begin to discern each specific characteristic of the object. Whereas, without the mental consciousness, the sense consciousness is like a dumb intelligence, a dumb person. He can see, hear all these things, but there is no discerning quality to the intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Tani nganzugi yujin sheba korangsura, ani kapgala nganzugi ni yula judugyo roas. Yul. Odi khande jugyo res.
Pena ji nganzu peji shawana jinsen shimbi ngushiro shana.
La.
Jingi sen shini ngushiro. Pena shiken gilo deta pena yigi shiba jigi shigore. Ani pagi jingi sen pagi yila karatingi shiba ina. Inja yu tikasa shiba chegda.
So now the most kind of gross example is an omniscient consciousness, which is able to perceive what exactly is going on in someone else's consciousness. So that's also a consciousness. This subjective consciousness itself is a consciousness. So the object is a consciousness, something other than the subjective consciousness itself.
There's somebody else that somebody else's consciousness becomes the object.
Now that's the most gross example. Then similarly, in meditation, for example, if you think about the mindfulness meditation that you do, then a consciousness is aware of the sensation that is experienced within the continuum of a consciousness itself. Now, now herein, there exists a difference in many different Buddhist schools. So it seems if we think about it, if from the outset, if you begin to say that an awareness is aware of itself, then it seems to suggest that there is a self-cognizing awareness, an awareness that is able to know that very awareness. Now, in the Prasangika Madhyamika school, they very emphatically refute this, that this is not possible, that a consciousness cannot be self-cognizing. A consciousness can be cognizing of an instance of another consciousness, a moment of another consciousness, but not that very consciousness, not that very particular consciousness. They use this logical argument. Then if there is a self-cognizing consciousness, then you would follow that a lamp illuminates its surrounding. Then if there is a self-cognizing consciousness, then darkness illuminates darkness. If there is a self-cognizing consciousness, self-cognizing, same consciousness able to cognize the same consciousness, then it will follow that logically darkness also illuminates darkness. Uma tenjuagi rangri lai di shamugoy junze kisi rangri donasra ni mimba sela chobari jaingra.
제가 잠도 천하도 배실로디 배실은 담을 통으라 라 다리 신바지 소에나 시만 미지기 신바지 시에나 배드닌 게도 전부 통야 말아 가서는 중다 담다 시라야라 전에 안데 히에 담으래요 근데 이제 아니 수수 mam보지 로네 아니 수수기 가르를 태워도 뒤따야마도 뒤 덴바르디 점을 잠도 시투무다 이네 잠도 아니 두다는 샤방 담다요라 라 두다디에 코나도 베드 코라게 타지든 게 말데 지dan 두다 고마고마 간도야기 디라 때는 아주 센자백은 도다 야보지 시와이네 감마데시 감마데 때는 변나 지라만도 데바 센자 오마베라 고마고마 오마오마데 켄자 감마감마데 켄자나 지레라 거라 근데 인자 파기 시다 말아본다 데 참아야 콘투네 도서 집아체 양간도 카투 통도 아 그지 베드 가가르샤 파기 디기 데시도 가르이나 근데 삼시라 디디가랑 아주 mambol로야다 아니 수수
Now, when we hear this kind of arguments, different assertions, then it is important at this point that we understand that the Buddhist philosophical tradition is very rich, very diverse in its nature. And as such, it is important as someone who studies Buddhism that we do not cherry pick. We only pick onto one assertion that seems to be contradictory and then begin to feel that, okay, the teachings themselves are contradictory. That is not appreciating the rich and diverse nature of the Buddhist philosophical tradition. Because if we look at the 4 classical traditional Buddhist schools of thought, then you will begin to, if you really do study them, then you will begin to understand that all of these different assertions have their own place and purpose within each traditional school or school's thought. Now, it is important that as someone who studies Buddhism, to study the assertions of all of these different schools first. And for example, if you are really able to understand the assertions and the philosophy of the mind-only school very carefully, very well, then you can really begin to understand the assertion and the philosophy of the middle way school. And then similarly, if we are to make sense of the mind-only school's philosophy and assertions, then it follows that we must make sense of the 2 first schools, the Sutantrika school and the Vaibhashika school.
가서는 말한줄 상담다 고급대 아니 저버저 수수 돌린체 로버도 냠도 아니 치거라 아니 수수 스타 디카리아가 됐다고 그래서 스타 미지기 오 디릴레티 치부치 많이 봐 수수 로이 나체 피지 땅네 아니 시와에는 칼로 신네 땅이 녀바탕으로 차이라 네 제가 나시 산지기 숨을 들어가다 아 세지대위 세진들 레바탈라 나이까 라와 차이 그시르면서다라 근데 코로나 숨샤주들래 아니 세드 세뇨니지는 아니 세드 문에르다 아니 세지 다와 세드 바체와 다르와 세지 더위 세진들아 아니 바체와다 다와다 칸데지 키미션 발게 티웨나 가리네 세드 뇨디페 문에르다 자자치그라 대나마세게 아니게 산지기 숨샤주 키 코나게 까데야 산지기 숨주레라네 저침부 맞으서 예 숨주레라네 맞으라네 산지기 때는 숨 가서나 산제를 구바에 봤던 되지만 세지대 세지대 레바따라 가이까라 데 코나게 송샤지들 레바따 랑와 차실라 디가라 레바따네 아니 저랑 양슬량 그러면서 그 싫으면 산제기 송을라는 모디 치는 거야 말이야. 그즈베 고지슈다.
And I think that is the beauty of the study of Buddhist philosophy. Even when we were young students, our teachers never used to kind of give a conclusive explanation about each school's thoughts, about each school's philosophy. Where we are taught their assertions, but we are always advised, now you have to debate between yourselves to establish your own understanding of these different schools and their thoughts. And this is because nobody else can bring forth a certainty about your understanding. Nobody else can bring forth a true conviction in your understanding. That only you can bring forth yourself. So if we are to gain a true sense of conviction, a true sense of certainty in the teachings, then we must investigate, examine it, debate it on our own, and we must build our own comprehensive understanding of it. We cannot take someone else's word for it. That's why that's the beauty of Buddhist study. And then this kind of empirical approach towards study of Buddhism comes from the Buddha's own proclamation, advice to his students. The Buddha was confident enough to say that all of you followers, monks and so forth, you should not take my word and follow my words out of a sense of reverence for me, but just as a goldsmith begins to check if a gold is authentic or pure by cutting it, polishing it, burning it, then similarly examine and investigate my words similarly. And if through your own analysis, investigation, you found this to be true, then you can begin to follow these teachings, but not simply out of a mere sense of reverence and devotion. And all Buddhist followers and practitioners must take this advice to heart.
So.
Is there a text that you would recommend related to the five paths that we were talking about yesterday, if we're interested in learning more? And then the second question is, if we're interested in systematic study, like you're describing, how would you suggest getting started in a kind of grounded way?
진행한주 가상한주기 람nga lai sungros. 아니 게시마 치랑기 삼슬라 치나 람nga 딜라다 디슬롭종도 체고 삼나스라. 아니 싸와야나 빼자. 아니 가기도라 아니 시 때나야 보여르베스.
디 인도 그 테이프다나 베나가주에 디 살람게 남자래. 코라람도 사다 두주게 테이프여. 데 인지 돌려나 하면서라. 그 돌려.
위치스타다.
그래라. 그거다나.
So in the classical monastic institutions, when we are studying the presentation of the spiritual path, then there is a text called the Grounds and Paths. So maybe there is an English translation of the same text you can look up, but that's where you begin to study these five paths and the 10 grounds and so forth. And nangchu lomnir chege ani mebada dumbada yunasra ani nganzugi nangchu dromshi yaboji nalayra ani rimbado kali ani lobjon che deba yunasra ani geshima gitela ani lamden do chinaro nambas
지단게 람림도 계신거라. 다 람림디 가르려냐 지중 만보 장 찬이지 있다와이나 베데 가르선 창모 뒤대인죠. 베나 파시 오만즈 노아 하 참에 루루스셔지로셔. 아. 다 쩐주도지 로이나 카투카투랑한저게 나란서 근데 샤시랑 때문 두저 년보 때다저 스칸데스 지기도 들라파 칸데 땡고도 베 타시타 야부스 베나 하버데간저 때네 레우 듬바다 제버레 Kondi zubele udan ani dia. Chi jeba de kharara. Shakpa pong da khanda jeba da demba ene tuba ene. Chi zubele ud chi kharara. Ni yo pe kechamo ta de.
So now if you want to have some sort of systematic approach to your study of Buddhist practice and philosophy, then maybe the most comprehensive works that exist are the Lamrim literature, the Stages of the Path literature, and the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva. Now, with that being said, I think one begins to appreciate the Lamrim literature after you have extensively studied other texts first. Because when you have studied almost all the other texts, then the Lamrim text, the Stages of the Path text, helps us to create like an overview of all these different aspects, and it's concise, comprehensive in its nature, because in it talks about everything there is in the stages of the path, the perfection, ethics, even tantra, and so forth. So after you have studied extensively, if you want to create like a comprehensive overview, then maybe the Lamrim literature is a good text. And then now if you are focused on your practice, the subtleties, the intricacies, the challenges of personal practice, then the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life is very, very effective. For example, it goes like into very great detail about each of these practices that you can personally cultivate. For example, the chapter on forbearance, it's something really, really profound. The chapter on forbearance, and when you begin to appreciate this kind of things, then you would really, it will really help you to cultivate a more effective personal spiritual practice. Nalanda diploma course. Geshe dojidam de pyogangi konzo jikte do atsendachi.
Ale.
Ote ya boyores.
Very systematic.
Okay, yeah. 인지 들어도 베이나 이제.
인지나를 konzo
인지 들어. 니뭐 같이 돼 라스티. 아니 단에 준준 나로 간저 단에 착바기 거라. 라 차바 파빵당 거라. 지시래. 니뭐 레드 같이 진 거다. 가서 그게 비밀을 메라 주시 단계 뭐 저도 되나. 이네 디 가르선도 산단데 사빈 시와라이 코랑이 순사기 늦어디 제바인지라. 근데 인제 땅아서 룰을 비밀 룰을 차신 째와나 디 문장 봤다고 차나이 공부인 봐. 근데 mambusun이라. 근데 파칼로는 집어래 불에 대가라요래. 봐. 근데 카투타오나 아 보문도 줄라메라쇼 당샤 산데도. 근데 리기도 이네 간디 가르라나 도도 가르시워서나 간주 고남바 탄제니 아니 차베이 갈라나 추메이 비주 도다니 자지 자탐바야 빼 야포스셔라. 봐. 근데 말레스 문장와라시다 빼 차나 공부 되게 두시바. 봐. 땅아서 미칠라 차나 차사기 시고를 많이 쓰셔. 봐. 오늘 저런 따라 차이도 따차네 따파이 고샤샤나 아니 들라 차이도 라니도 저런 게 zupu도 인구조 제니도 들라 따칼로 zupu들 차이는 zupu 들어가는 사람도 차이입니다. 군이 나시 군이 카트도 단도 주랑 게 zupu들 차신 단도 차야 봐서 신나지기도 하스. 봐. 배 차색이 지고로 또 셔진데 배 다시 터도 봐. 세상도 자신이 넣어야다도 컨트롤이나 컨트롤 가리를 세기도 봐. 그런 게 드라들을 세기도 미들을 세기도 봐자 하더니 예 미지스셔. 배 니저여다라.
So then when we are talking about the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, then it really explores each of the afflictions, each of these perfections in great detail. Now, more particularly when we are looking at the manner in which the text Shantideva explores the afflictions, the manner in which it arises, the object of our desire, object of our anger, then it, through that kind of instruction, it really helps us to almost destroy the basis or the object of attachment itself, the object of anger itself. It's that deep, it's that detailed, the instructions. And then many people had this reaction before, that in such detailed explanation, then in the Guide to the Bodhisattva Southwest way of life, Shantidewa talks about, uses the example of the female body as an object of attachment. Now in this, he begins to say that the female body is not really attractive in in its nature. You have to reflect on the ugliness, on the nature of the female body. But then many people immediately have the reaction, now he's being sexist, he's demeaning female and so forth. But that's not exactly the case, because when Shantideva was giving that teaching, he was addressing a group of monks. So as such, he was using that example. Now, it's just a matter of changing the object of attachment in our own reflection. If you are a female, you use the example of a male body. And then through like various examples, like what exactly are you attracted to? He begins to help us find the object of attachment. What exactly are you attached to? And then through that kind of instruction, the object of attachment itself becomes destroyed. And as such, there is no basis for attachment to arise anymore. So it's so detailed in its nature, the instructions.
Ni chana tizu shira mewa ina junju gu tsawa lora, tsawa shasang ma lora. Tina lo kode udo susu lo chik lo njua tanga jido. Sama sho chik drishan na pyamu. An tizu nyunyu ga di tas chichura. Ya nga zo tizu tubu ro yara, di lo yala, shasang lo yala kala khamara.
Now, if you don't have the time and inclination, then rather than reading a commentary of the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, maybe you can read the root text, the verses themselves, and if you take a read through it, I'm sure you will find many verses that will touch you, that you would relate to. And then try to make note of these verses which you relate to, and then try to reflect on these verses in your daily lives.
Bye.
When you say self-recognizing awareness does not exist, then does that follow that this pure awareness can never be aware of itself? And if there is an experience of the self-recognizing awareness, then that would also be an object of ignorance.
Tini nganzogi rangri la jora, takin rangri la di tenju lugla ni dogi mares ra. Tenju lugla rangri dogi mara. Rangri dogi medizamba ni meduwe da nganzogi rigba di ni rangri yonas ra. Rangri dumna ni Mumbai sel la di gita tewa di tong yoras. Di ni samlatang indizamba ni nganzogi da yishi la jora. Yishi la di ni nganzogi da yishi la di yangs nganzogi tanda chuin de bana la yishi la ni jiksong go dos. Yishi la di da bet sheba namba thapa ra yeshi la di sheba namba thapa di rasta sheba namba thapa di ani rangi rigyo mar bes ra ni te nas ra ani kisi te da rangi gi nywa ji ranju la chenas ra da rangi sheba rangi riba gi nywa ji chenas ra ani te ani marikba gi khonsu to du yor bes
예시기 얘기를 하니 시선
말이
예시
지원이 라 아니 예시디 넘버다 베시바로 와스 아니 넘버다 베 예시 예시바디게 랑 리글라디 되게 마로 왔다 룩디나라 라 요마르 베스 지와 담보지 지원이바 디스라 아니 기세 테다 아니 시바 랑게 랑 리베 뇽아지 체나스 소소라 티 마리베 원지 제와 레라네 아니 되고레 베스
예시기 근데 얘네미 라르메 시바로 주라 디게 아니 시바도 말라나 갈 디데 도도인기라
말 디기 코랑랑 또기요 말레스 예시 코라 예시 코랑기 예시 또기요 베스 또기요 말레 샤우레 베스다
근데 제가 말해 근데 사직이 투주기 쳔바지라 라예네 멤버 히바 라네 멤버 히바지라 되게 코랑게 시바다 쳔이 시바다 딱 하나지 그때 참아 또 거라 디 시바 전지기 아니 랑랑리래다 근데 샤고는다 대또다 요레스 당근데 그 랑리 인데면들래 두다 쳔바지기 지 샤당지 시오르마도 단다 딘데 예시기 아니 시바탕지 싱마레 계속 시에서나 콜라 랑랑리베 차돌라 뒤쪽고 말아.
So herein it is important to understand that the pure awareness that we are talking about and the self-cognizing consciousness that we are talking about is two different things. The self-cognizing consciousness that is being refuted in the Prasangika Madhyamika system is a refutation of a conventional self-cognizing consciousness in the other Buddhist philosophical schools. And it's not related to the pure awareness or the primordial awareness. The pure awareness or the primordial awareness is an omniscient awareness. So as such, it is not only able to cognize itself, but it is also able to cognize others' consciousness too. But the self-cognizing consciousness that is being refuted in the Madhyamika, Prasangika Madhyamika school is a self-cognizing consciousness that other schools posit in the conventional reality.
As per the Madhyamika school, what is the reality of the self-cognizing awareness that, and you know how pure, I'm not understanding so much the difference between pure awareness and the self-cognizing awareness. And when you say darkness illumines darkness, then does it mean that if we identify with the self-cognizing awareness as the pure awareness, then we are presuming, we are imagining an object of ignorance, and that is why it is like darkness being illuminated?
Now, if I try to explain this, we talk about direct perception, we talk about inferential cognition, and now within the Prasangika, within all the Buddhist schools, we place a lot of importance on what exactly is a valid cognition. Valid, true cognition, a valid cognition. So now in that process, different schools posit different ways in which what exactly qualifies a valid cognition. And so then we talk about direct perception and inferential cognition. And then other schools seems to posit a third form of cognition, which is a self-cognizing consciousness. The Madhyamika school refutes that there is no such thing as a self-cognizing consciousness. Now, bear in mind that this direct perception and inferential cognition at this point is not with regards to ultimate reality at this point. It's with regards to conventional reality. Tsema zinyu zamba ani nganzu ngusum tsema ani jebak tsema dinde shige roas ani ngusum jebak ki kapso an judame wa khashi ki rangri la ji sha yung yo res ani rangri ngusum ani ngusum jebak rangri la di sha yung zamba tendam gi la der ge ja shige yo mar se kapti de zamba kunzub ji chö ani ngusum do tomato ani jebak ki tomato odi ge ja shige yo res Tundamla pa dronata dike je loga chagiris.
Bikoped sometime think so shoyim did. But someone tony la jana, then got the saya to some me with chatter. Tiny de you but the ranja shower. Then answer the mindula this ngamadula, but that is an eomade, Mata machi with sanity yura. I think answer him hand or peshana. The demo madurio malasagomara and dimda, answer Chisago the thing.
So maybe I get the sense that you are digging a little bit too deep at this point. You cannot relate everything with emptiness. You know, all discussions in Buddhism with emptiness. Some discussions pertain particularly to conventional reality. So, for example, if we relate everything with emptiness, it becomes the case that we fail to appreciate functionality itself. For example, if we begin to see that piece of sweet up there and say that it is intrinsically, it does not have intrinsic nature, and then similarly, if you have to take a medicine, you are sick, then if you begin to say intrinsically, I'm not sick, intrinsically, I don't have to take medicine, that doesn't make sense. Within that, we have to be able to reflect on the functionality of phenomena.
지단이 독도 저랑이 시작이 숨서지거라. 배나 딘데질라 샤와이나. 디 자만이 메발라야마. 타니디 여바다. 타니디 자자 티고라 코나기 이기 티고는 아주 뉴 쿠실라네 키면 타니기 자자 티버데 여레스. 된다 맞자가는 여말. 디기니가 이티네 여바치다 메바니 샤오다. 디 하마고나 디베도 호라 여말란 림다. 딘데지 사나 타와이나 디기 쮸 카르로스나 이제 게와사네야 데브메바. 가서 그 데모트바 여마라. 아니 디바사네 디 메게와 메바 던데지 산타나 게디기 남자 가르치나 지칼로 야민도 샤시그라 그래서 계시 게와지 사이나 타니의 용게 용의 용고더라 타니의 용 이네 덴버트베 거래 요알네 요마레스 디바지 사바이네 메게와도 용고레스 이네 덴버트베 용고알네 용디 사상의 셰마트도 따다다 치다지 hundo야 징인가
So it is important that when we are contemplating on emptiness, we do understand that there is a basis of emptiness first. Emptiness itself, there is a basis of emptiness. And as such, it is important to appreciate not only the lack of intrinsic existence of the basis, but to also appreciate the functionality of the basis of emptiness. Otherwise, then if we only think about the lack of intrinsic nature, we fail to make sense of functionality. And if we fail to do this, then we fall to either of the extremes, wherein more particularly we fall to the extreme of nihilism. Whether we agree or not, we will fall to the extreme of nihilism. And if we are not careful about that, then with regards to our own spiritual practice, then we over time begin to fail to appreciate. We over time fail to appreciate virtuous and non-virtuous actions and their results, because we will think that there is no such thing as an intrinsically virtuous action. There is no such thing as an intrinsically non-virtuous action. That's not the manner in which one should approach it.
Their views, and understanding that is just quite helpful. And a true understanding of emptiness, it has, in a way, leads to a greater appreciation of form. Also, I don't find it in my experience that there is like the rejection of form doesn't fit well. The rejection of form doesn't feel good, or it creates more suffering. So yeah, I just wanted to say that that is not my. I'm careful of that. That's just not my. That's not an intention, and I do see the value of appreciating form as well. But it's just that when one has studied, a little bit about like different schools, so these little differences, they make a big difference in some understanding. For example, from what you just said, I think what you just explained, what I'm understanding is when you say. For example, if I say I'm aware of being aware, then this falls, some schools can kind of posit that as the ultimate understanding. And in experience, that hasn't felt right for a couple of reasons that I will not go into right now. So
it's just maybe a difference in explaining it. For example, schools which say that there is such a thing as self-cognizing consciousness would say that the same consciousness cognizes the same consciousness. Now, the Madhyamika Prasangika school would say that it says that there is no such thing as self-cognizing consciousness. They say that just look at the difference in time. Okay? There is the time gap first between you cognizing a consciousness. So that's not the same particular instance of consciousness. It's a different instance of consciousness cognizing a different instance of consciousness. No, other schools, when they say that there is such a thing as self-cognizing consciousness, they say that at the same time, a consciousness is able to cognize the same consciousness. So when the Prasangika Madhyamika school refutes this, they're not saying that it is impossible for consciousness to cognize another consciousness. That's not what they are saying. They are saying, just think first about the time difference. There is a lap in time. There's not a lap, there's a lag in time first. There's a time difference between one consciousness cognizing another consciousness. Not at the same time, it can never be at the same time. So as such, it's not the same particular instance of consciousness. So as such, it's not the same consciousness.
Your response reminded me of a question that I had earlier about understanding the nature of enlightenment. If it is a continuous awareness of ultimate reality, is it a simultaneous continuous awareness of ultimate and conventional reality?
Spontaneous.
Spontaneous.
Effortless, spontaneous.
Effortless, spontaneous awareness
Mm.
of the different levels of reality
Yes.
with no gap in recognition.
Kala skodi awareness te kala.
Nganzu bemel hindu ji isra. Tanda nganzu ki rangri la dema de keje jilegi orwas tango moi thiwa dila. Rangri dönyi gi tüchik do sheba digi sheba rang rigi ores. Jigs.
네.
Rangri rangri dönyi digi isra. Tüchik do sheba digi sheba.
시든 돼.
Dolmala can I
Sit
have some more? Yeah, it's okay.
칼리 칼라시.
Oh yeah, jigs. Thank you.
캐마 칼리. thank you.
Oh yeah, dene dubdama rangri döken do zoge isra. Tüchik do sheba chigi sheba thagarang rigire lage rangri shagi orwas. Ta uma tenjuba gi rakba doji la shanasra. Tüchik la sheba chigi sheba thagarang rigire la di yomi se ores. Sheba chigi chig düre tü kurang la cheba dugires thambo. Chezan sheba thagarang kab thigi sheba thagarang chagi yomares. Samlo chik tangna o thagasne khwalena digi ores. Ta deda lendi jayendu zama mola thiwa ngone chigi yo di thamba so sonsra. Nganzo geda lanama be sanje goban tomnasra. Sanje goban gi jula yobe yishi ra. Dige ene thendam kunzup ra. Thendam dang kunzup gi ngobe ne lotisra. Ene lotigi ene bemel hundup gi ra. Chema jeshi. Toing gorwas.
사직이 투지를 예비 시시리야.
Shebadiki. 남친디기 ra. Bemel hundup gi ene tagarang tüji do toing gorwas. Kunzup gi
최다 단단.
kunzup gi chodan thendam gi chönija. De rele.
네. 이내야 사지 타벨에 담보 베밀르지 마라. 사지 타벨 담보 신이 지기 로존치 하나 슈 되나서 손나절나 토나 고남 되는 로다 되네 고남 고 good 다 망보 지르라. 남 토남라 코라 되네 망보 다 되네 참아 림베 되네 아니 타람을 남 라줄을 째라. 딘데시라진 아니 딘데위 이신군도 주여주라. 나도 딘데위 시 담보네 세는 한테 담이 빠나 신지기 줄에 아니 딘데 시디라는 디고마. 사제 호라 딘데 유모비 두바 참상 시제 인데 로도 연스 집에 조바데 제바지라 아니 사제 샤워라. 딘데지라 아니 딘데 시디 칼로 총라워 투지라.
So now, when we say that the omniscient awareness of a Buddha is spontaneous and effortless in the manner in which it perceives conventional as well as ultimate reality or ultimate reality or phenomena, then it is important to understand that even though that omniscient consciousness is, or awareness is effortless and spontaneous at that point, but to manifest the effortless and spontaneous quality of that awareness, it takes a lot of effort. So this is important to appreciate. Otherwise, we begin to expect our own experience, our own awareness to be something similar, effortless and spontaneous. That's maybe a misguided way of thinking about it. More to you, Les.
Would it be correct to say that as per this school that we are studying, this experience of the subcognizing pertains to conventional reality?
Mm-hmm.
Would it be correct to say that with respect to the school that we are studying, this understanding of the self-cognizing awareness pertains to conventional reality?
There weren't even conventional terms except the self-cognizing consciousness. So maybe if I give you this question, then you will begin to The biggest kind of question in this school, if you appreciate this question, then you will maybe begin to understand. Maybe we need first an appreciation for what exactly is a valid cognition. Without that, it's kind of pointless to talk about self-cognizing consciousness. So the biggest question in this school is a question along this line. And if you appreciate this question, then maybe that's where your investigation can begin. So in this school, they say that there is not even a particle of intrinsic existence in phenomena. So this in effect says there is not even a particle of objective existence in phenomena, right? Everything is merely an appearance in and of the mind. Everything is merely an imputation. If things exist, they simply exist as an appearance in the mind, or a term imputed by a conceptual thought onto the object. The object in itself does not have any intrinsic nature. So then the question is asked, if that is indeed the case, that there is no objective existence, then what exactly is the difference in this situation? For example, if you are walking about in the night, then you see a snake, all right? Then in that moment, if you see a snake in the dark, you would begin to experience fear, anxiety, and all that, yes? Then similarly, when you come in the morning and look there, in the same spot that you saw the snake last night and realize that it was just a piece of rope, right? Snake in a rope. So if there is no objective existence, intrinsic objective existence and intrinsic nature of the object itself, then what exactly is the difference, between mistaking a snake to be a rope and a snake? So herein, you have to make sense of valid cognition with regards to this question. What exactly is a valid cognition now?
If the appearance of the snake is also objectively not real, even the disappearance of the snake is objectively.
No, the question is, what exactly is the difference between it inspires the same kind of fear, anxiety. Yes? If it's a real snake, you would have felt the same fear and anxiety. And even if it was a piece of rope, if you mistake it to be a snake, you will still. So what exactly is the difference? Because we say everything is imputed by the mind. Ta nganzo rangri la de la mambo pha samdan de meri la sambo chema la na khande ji la sha go de la nyok da che yo
chidang kyang lo no dang da rangri de she de we na ra ani nganzo lori na lo ra lori de ta na ani ya she nganzo lo do lo che dang khane ra chidang gi pe na lo la ta nganzo ni ngui de si ji la me ba la nganzo gi chuban zen de ni mambo pe sha juma khen la do ra juma gi chu nganzo 때문에 빼는 사람들 매직 따디 하고 뒤동네 뭐에 다가나 통다 이내한 점장한테 일단 mambo 주다데 되게 유래였던 때는 다 mambo 시고를 노리긴 걸라 장외나 라 아니 맞아 주마 캔다 미주 추다 다든데 멜로나게 지식이 중에다 mambo 지라 빼샤 드들을 좀 지나 아니 야가신 거지.
So now, in effect, what we are trying to establish here through this kind of question and through this kind of study of the object and subject engagement, what we are trying to establish is what exactly is a valid cognition and what exactly is a mistaken consciousness. So, if you are really interested in this, it's not something easily explained in 5 minutes. If you are really interested in this, then try to read about mind and awareness. And now in English, there's a book called Mind in Tibetan Buddhism. Mind in Tibetan Buddhism by Jeffrey Hopkins, which is a translation of a classical monastic text. Now in this, it talks about how exactly does a consciousness becomes mistaken with regards to its engaged object, appearing object, conceived object. So there are so many different layers to this. It's not necessarily the case that if you are mistaken with regards to an appearing object, that you are mistaken with the object itself. Because, for example, an inferential cognition is mistaken with regards to the appearing object. A thought cannot cognize the object directly. So as such, it's not, the appearing object is always a thought. But even though it is mistaken with regards to the appearing object, it is not necessarily the case that it is mistaken with regards to the object itself. So there are a lot of layers to this. Mode of engagement, mode of appearance, mode of conception, and so forth. It's not something so easily explained.
So in this case, it's a mistaken mind in the act of appearance, seeing the robe as a snake, and it's also a mistaken mind with the act of apprehension, right?
Thought.
So it's not a deceptive mind, but it's a mistaken mind. So it's not a valid connection.
Yes. Now you are missing one. Maybe you try to think about it. 2, you got it. But there is another one too that you have to maybe get.
I'm missing one.
Missing one. Tanganzogi tanda druida thabadela yasum shadizaman tanyedu ni thagwa yan tundam la jo ko ni di diksa nawa da thuris zimba ya thuris ra ta tundam la de la demarma do di shewra di churang samutana ni churang nyeba chena ya boyres.
So which one am I missing? Act of appearance and act of apprehension.
Now try to think about it. Maybe. Yeah. Collada style jimji. Do you have the handout from the winter retreat still with you? No. Maybe I'll give you this later on. And then I'll tell you which passage, and then if you read it, then you'll begin to make sense. Yeah. Dingala nanzo lamrim gidiyora. Di call jento. Yeah, and if anybody is interested, I compiled this. It's all about emptiness, meditation on emptiness. And if you need a PDF, feel free. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah? Okay.
So how important is Buddhist psychology in order to become like a Buddhist practitioner?
Very important. Nangchugi samkamgi namshajora. Di kechambo kazeresra. Kisi nangchu nyamne chingi na.
Samkamgi namjare kazi kechambra.
Lo semda semjong lorigi namshat.
Ale lori namja jayale kechem kazilora. De pek kechambra. Kazana nganzochi lori gi namja de penan azadile kala semda senjung. Ra ane nyumo do jetang senjung go jngaru. Ra to changma din sheyongra. To pe tashi taw pe dor. Then nganzo chu tang de yule chu ten la chu mambujur. To changma din sheyong. Ra pe awa lori pe kechambra.
So it's crucially important to study Buddhist psychology. Now, when you say Buddhist psychology, it's not it's not just about mind and mental factors actually. Before one can begin to talk about mind and the different emotions, we study the manner in which the mind engages its object, the relation between the mind and object, and how in that process there is mistakes. There is the manner in which the mind engages the object effectively decides whether it is mistaken, is a mistaken consciousness or not. Mistaken with regards to its object, mistaken with regards to its appearing object, basis, and so forth. You study that first, and only after studying that, you begin to study what is called the mind and mental factors. So when you look at the mind and mental factors, in that presentation, we look at the different emotions, the function of each emotion, the nature of each emotion, the manner in which each of these emotions arises within us.
This is fantastic. Amazing. This knowledge is amazing.
Tadi khalewa dusra.
Very, very precious.
So yeah, if you can, you should really take some time to study Buddhist psychology.
So Geshema next retreat Buddhist psychology.
Juma anis te lorigi namsha jora. Te masung tuna ya bor semda simju namshati.
Yeah, this is good.
We really do need time. It cannot be effectively covered like in a few days. You need time. 1 month that this dawa chik ta ots ra.
That's it.
Make a new creation we talked about yesterday out of it.
Like a study program.
In the Zanzan Michigi Sansil Tani Chiksone, Samale di Mina Kalakabda. La, the Digan, Giant Deva Mamboyana. Ani, Sona Pentoda. Chadang only kitchen, but I loaded as ra. In a lorry, Pajuela Calera, coverage.
Jure the ots
Da. The Lord don't pay Yaboda, Pentoda.
The simda simjum koranda thara. Yuda using judin the yoda sauda. Jure we kabo erta.
Julian Jubanelli, then Hawa to the two here, Kanda two on the Bemora. Sure.
But you have to bear in mind that it will not be an easy discussion, the class, if we are to hold it. And also, we cannot simply begin to organize a class because one person is interested. We have to ensure that there is enough participation. And now, more particularly, Geshema is concerned about the translation. With the mind and mental factors, it's okay. It's almost straightforward. But if we really have to study subject and object engagement, then it's very, very difficult to effectively translate it in English.
아니야, 저 따지르. 근데 펜토에 노네 도지라. 밀레 펜토다. 곰바 코난저게 차시 주라. 뜻이잖아. 다 따이대시라. 아이는 아주 디 마음 받대 단다 주듯이지라. 나 아주 달래지다 되네. 파이 언제래 아니 기주래 겐라래 아주 참 가르진 주듯이네. 한다다라.
So now it's on the table for discussion. We will speak to the director, the committee, all the nuns, Geshe-la, the translator, and then we'll see like okay. 아니 this is 마치 콘솔 뭐에 디 콘솔 기제시우스. 뭐는 디 도토나 야보페라. 데 유다 유징기 도탄데 도토나 콘솔다 여유 펜보여.
네.
I can easily get participants. A lot of psychology kids would love to attend such courses.
예, 먼저 도난다.
그래서 도나 얘는 얘기 동 직단이라. 참마도 두고 말해. 다 가정에 디도치다. 로야 가라 찾아 로거다. 이미 디나르로체. nengadile tagje ne chasan drama taonge tichora kaleshin rudocho
so if
kazen nganza sabba chene yashirida juma ya juma chana zalege na khashi juma ya lori jande ni de baye na mena khashi andi maung bangan chashi tiara ine tanda chana zala tana chamala yo ine ngedi rudochi ne ngani san ra this sochora.
So if all of you are really interested, then we shouldn't really keep pushing this for some time in the future, and I will try to prepare on my own a sort of comprehensive presentation, and then maybe we can find the time to go through it.
이는 가서 니마 하시는 차선 두두고 말아 이네 디나 랭가 첨보로 가르도 단라.
So bear in mind that we won't be able to cover everything, but we'll try to cover sort of a comprehensive overview of the subject and object engagement. Help with what? Translation? Translation?
I wish.
그래.
Ko robot do go in the la.
라. 알레니 단다 실라 당사.
So, bell is rung for lunch. We stop here.